Before the very first roll of soft, quilted toilet paper was ever manufactured, humans faced a quiet, universal problem for 99% of our history. Every brilliant emperor, famous pharaoh, and legendary philosopher you have ever admired had to deal with this exact same undignified biological reality. But what they actually reached for in those private moments will completely shatter your perception of the ancient world. Imagine crouching in a freezing forest around 12,000 BC, desperately grabbing a fistful of random leaves and praying they aren't poison ivy. For ancient hunter-gatherers, the entire world was their bathroom, and nature provided the only available tools for survival. If you were lucky enough to find a patch of soft, absorbent, and naturally antibacterial moss, you had basically discovered the Stone Age equivalent of a premium luxury product. But everything changed when humans stopped wandering and started packing themselves by the thousands into the world's very first crowded cities. Suddenly, a private moment in the woods transformed into a massive public engineering challenge that required a truly bizarre solution. Enter the ancient Romans, who as usual, decided to handle the entire situation bigger, louder, and much more publicly than anyone else in history. If you stepped into a Roman public latrine around 100 AD, you would not find a single ounce of privacy or individual stalls. Instead, you would see a long marble bench with holes cut into it, where citizens sat side by side, robes hitched up, casually chatting about business. The Roman toilet was a highly vibrant social space where people gossiped, debated complex philosophy, and maintained a shocking amount of direct eye contact. But the most infamous part of this entire setup was the tool they used to clean themselves, an object known as the tersorium. A tersorium was simply a sea sponge attached to the end of a wooden stick, and it carried one horrifying catch. It was entirely communal. There was a small channel of cold running water at your feet, along with a bucket filled with vinegar or heavy salt water. You would take the shared sponge, reach down to clean yourself, rinse it off in the bucket, and then leave it right there for the next person to use. The famous Roman philosopher Seneca even wrote a dark story about a gladiator who used this exact sponge stick to tragically take his own life in the latrine. While we love to imagine the Romans as a perfectly sophisticated empire with clean aqueducts and advanced plumbing, this shared sponge was a parasite's absolute dream come true. But if you think a communal sponge on a stick sounds terrible, the ancient Greeks had a solution that was arguably much more abrasive. The Greeks relied on objects called peisoi, which literally translates to small, smooth pebbles or broken shards of ceramic pottery. They would use these hard ceramic shards to scrape themselves clean, which real modern medical journals have proven caused severe skin damage and painful infections over time. But the Greeks also practiced ostracism, where citizens would vote to exile a hated politician by scratching their name onto a broken piece of pottery called an ostracon. Because these voting shards were the exact same size and shape as their toilet stones, vengeful Greeks would literally wipe themselves with the names of their worst political enemies. This universal struggle connects you directly to Cleopatra, Aristotle, and the very first artists who painted ancient caves. As history marched on, different cultures around the globe got incredibly creative based on whatever their local environment could offer them. Up in the freezing north, the Vikings upgraded their winter bathroom comfort by using soft sheep's wool and thick tufts of damp moss. Coastal communities throughout the Pacific and parts of Asia turned to the ocean, using the smooth, curved edges of mussel and clam shells as reusable scrapers. In rural America, early settlers and farmers found a surprisingly perfect tool in dried corn cobs after the kernels were stripped away. The corn cob system became so popular that some farmers kept a two-cob system in the outhouse, one to use, and a different colored one just to check their progress. Meanwhile, in massive parts of the Middle East, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, the ultimate answer to hygiene was never a dry object at all. They used a vessel of water in their left hand, a method that was vastly cleaner because water actually washes away waste instead of just smearing it. This ancient practical hygiene rule became so deeply embedded into cultural etiquette that the left hand is still considered strictly unclean for greeting or eating today. But while the rest of the world was struggling with leaves, shells, sharp stones, and shared sponges, one civilization was centuries ahead of everyone else. The Chinese officially invented paper around the 2nd century BC and rapidly realized this cheap, disposable material had a brilliant alternative use. By the year 589 AD, a Chinese scholar explicitly wrote that he would never dare to wipe himself with paper that contained the sacred writings of wise sages. By the time the Ming dynasty arrived, the imperial court was manufacturing soft, custom, beautifully perfumed toilet paper on a massive, industrial scale for the royal family. Europe, on the other hand, lagged terribly behind for centuries, forcing the wealthy to use rags or lace, while the poor survived on whatever the land provided. When printing presses finally spread, people began reusing old newspapers, political pamphlets, and eventually, the famous Sears Roebuck mail order catalog. Families would simply hang the thick catalog on a nail in the outhouse and tear out a single page at a time until the company switched to glossy paper. The modern commercial toilet paper industry finally arrived in 1857, thanks to an eccentric American entrepreneur named Joseph Gaiety. He sold flat sheets soaked in soothing aloe vera and was so incredibly proud of his invention that he watermarked his own name onto every single sheet. Yet, the product didn't catch on instantly because it was initially marketed as a specialized medical remedy for painful hemorrhoids rather than an everyday luxury. The classic perforated roll we use today on a cardboard tube was popularized later in the 1890s by the innovative Scott brothers. However, the Scott Company was initially so deeply embarrassed by the social taboo of the bathroom that they refused to put their own name on the packaging. This brings us back to the ultimate historical plot twist involving the magnificent sanitation infrastructure of the ancient Roman Empire. On paper, the Romans possessed the most advanced sewers, public baths, and toilets, which logically should have made them the healthiest civilization in the world. But modern archaeological science analyzing fossilized feces discovered that intestinal parasites and dangerous diseases did not decrease at all during Roman rule. Their warm, shared public baths were rarely changed and became breeding grounds for bacteria, while the communal sponge stick actively delivered parasites from person to person. The very tools the Romans built to conquer filth and feel civilized were the exact things quietly making their entire population sick. The way human beings deal with their most basic biological needs is never just a minor, embarrassing footnote hidden away in history books. It shapes our languages, creates our deepest social taboos, builds the hidden sewers beneath our cities, and directly determines who survives and who dies. The next time you casually reach for a soft, comfortable roll of two-ply paper, remember that you are the modern heir to thousands of years of painful trial and error. Every single leaf, rough stone, scraped shell, and communal sponge on a stick ultimately paved the way for the quiet luxury of the modern bathroom. Imagine how shocked an ancient hunter-gatherer would be to see our endless rows of super soft, multi-ply rolls neatly stacked in modern supermarkets. They spent their entire lives just trying to avoid a painful rash or a dangerous infection from a bad choice of foliage. Meanwhile, the sophisticated citizens of Rome genuinely believed their advanced aqueducts made them the cleanest people on earth. Yet they were completely blind to the microscopic monsters hitching a ride on their favorite bathroom tool. Think about the pure physical pain a medieval peasant endured during a freezing winter with nothing but rough hay. Or the psychological satisfaction an Athenian felt while scraping away with the name of their political rival. These aren't just funny stories to laugh at while sitting in your own comfortable, private bathroom today. They are proof that human progress is rarely a straight line from darkness into light. Sometimes, our most advanced inventions actually cause our biggest unseen health disasters. And sometimes, the simplest ancient methods turn out to be far superior to fancy infrastructure. The history of hygiene is essentially a mirror reflecting our deepest fears, desires, and social classes. The rich have always found ways to buy comfort, whether it was royal silk, scented paper, or imported lace rags. The poor were always left to rely on the raw elements of the earth, risking their health with every single wipe. But no matter your wealth or status, the fundamental biological urge remains exactly the same for every human. It is the ultimate equalizer that breaks down all societal barriers and royal pretenses. We have hidden this history away for generations because the modern world is deeply embarrassed by bodily functions. We look at ancient habits with a sense of disgust, forgetting the immense struggle it took to get here. Every step of this journey required someone to try something new, often with highly painful consequences. From the first brave soul who tested an unknown leaf to the entrepreneur who dared to print his name on paper. Our ancestors suffered through thousands of years of absolute discomfort so that we could have peace of mind today. They turned a brutal daily struggle into an automated, highly commercialized multi-billion-dollar industry. So don't take that simple, cardboard tube in your bathroom for granted ever again. It represents the ultimate victory of human ingenuity over our most basic, undignified reality. When you look back at the grand timeline of human civilization, toilet paper is a very recent luxury. We survived for hundreds of thousands of years using the rawest materials imaginable. And that survival required a level of resilience we can barely comprehend in our sterile modern lives. Next time you think about history, don't just focus on the massive battles or grand monuments. Look down at the small, forgotten tools.